Okay, well, I'm so happy to introduce you, Viveka Ramel.
Viveka.
After asking you how to pronounce your name, I then proceeded to botch it. Um, and so you're a great member of the ProSocial community. You're trained as a clinical psychologist with a neuroscience focus, and you have a clinical practice. You operate both out of Lund in Sweden and in San Francisco. And they're two beautiful places to shuttle back and forth between, and also teach courses at Lund University in addition to your clinical practice. And the fact that you're talking about climate psychology, I think, is a wonderful blend of everything from the micro all the way down to neuroscience to the individual as, of course, a fundamental unit oriented towards the macro, the global climate science. And so, what a beautiful multi-level focus you have. And
Hmm.
so, with that, please take it away, and then I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so I hope you can all see the slides that will be coming up here.
Yep, looks
All
good.
right. Looks good? Great. Yeah, so thanks for everyone for being here. I'm really honored and grateful for this opportunity to share some of the some ideas that I've been exploring the last few years, in particular after we moved to Sweden quite suddenly during the pandemic to provide schooling for our children. And I've had a chance here to dive in a little bit more to the climate field, and over, like sort of psychological perspectives came up for me, given my background, and I had a chance to I've had a chance to unpack them a little bit more in this course that we offered at Lund University in climate psychology and elsewhere. So I'm happy to just give a little snapshot of that here today. I think the way it works, we tend to kind of run through the presentation first. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I may not get to them until afterwards. All right. So brief outline here. I'm going to talk about the Great Unraveling, borrowing from the great Joanna Macy, and then 3 centers of awareness and learning. And if there's more time, I'll also get into the Great Turning. We might get there in the discussion, if not before. So jumping into the Great Unraveling. And I'll start with this quote that seems to say it to me. Sum it up. I used to think that top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. It's a quote from an environmental lawyer, Gus Beth, and an advisor. And it kind of hit the thumb on the nail for me when I came across that quote a while ago. And we are not just talking about climate change here, although it seems to be a sort of cradle that that is a foundation for many other crises that we're facing at the moment, of biodiversity loss and threats to basic human well-being, conflicts and wars. So there's no shortage of crises. And temperatures have been rising consistently since the 1880s, from when we measured them, and particularly so in the last 2/3. The temperatures have increased the most since 1975, 2/3 since 1975, with the hottest year being our last year on Earth. And this, of course, causes all kinds of ripple effects for us and the more than human world, including human migration, but also animals. And the hotter it gets, the more habitat loss we will see. And since 1969, we have had a really rapid increase in the loss of the animal population, greater for some animal groups than others. So we have company in the threat that we are facing. And to sum this up, I think the planetary boundary research is a really handy way. This is research done by scientists, really top scientists in this field, and they've published since 2009. And as you see, this is sort of like the state of the planet, and it's like it indicates our safe operating space. And the more of these orange sectors that are crossed, the more threatened and unstable and dwindling is sort of the resilience of our planet. And now into the most recent publication, 6 out of these 9 areas were crossed. And so reaching tipping points, and we don't know what will happen the more of these tipping points we reach and their interactive effects. But they show and indicate really like an unwell patient, where like the blood pressure and the temperatures are really haywire. So vital signs are not good. And for instance, in addition to carbon dioxide in concentrations in the atmosphere that have crossed the boundaries, we have biodiversity loss, and we have more and more open space being used for agriculture, and 50% of the US land, for instance, is actually now used for agriculture, deforestation and urban sprawl. We have of the 1% of our fresh water, 1% of the water on Earth, is becoming more and more unavailable and contaminated, in part due to biochemical flows like phosphorus and nitrogen from fertilizers. That's really threatening the food chain in our oceans. And we are finding, where we're finding more and more plastic, actually that is a novel entity. Microplastics are now found in mother's breast milk. So here's a pretty dire picture of the state of our ecosystem and the system that supports us, our very sustenance. So it is, how come we've gotten here? And it suggests that we're here because we might have designed a system that is based on an outdated worldview. The dominant social paradigm is one way of summarizing this outdated worldview or paradigm. And it includes beliefs such as these: that humans are separate from and superior to nature, that nature can and should be controlled, that individuals have a right to maximum economic gain, and progress equals economic growth. These are kind of paradigms or worldviews that we seem to just sort of be swimming in. It's the water that we grow up in. But the more we do that, the more likely we are to end up here, right? with no healthy planet and ecosystem to sustain us. So it's a wicked problem indeed. People have been trying to resolve this for a long time, or to solve it for a long time. And we know by now it is anthropogenic, meaning it's caused by human behaviors that are informed by our worldviews. That is out of date, and we have a history of isms, from industrialism or individualism, consumerism, and materialism and so forth, that have generated this crisis. And it's so large at this point that it's really a struggle to grasp it. At least it is for me. The kind of the time, the place, and existential dimensions of it. So what is a little human to do when we think and ponder and try to wrestle with this enormous problem, the crisis we're in? And if this is hard for us as adults, I think it's even more challenging for our youth. And in a huge survey was done in 10 countries across the global north and south, youth aged 16 to 25, 84 reported worrying about climate change and feeling sadness, anger, powerlessness, helplessness, and guilt. And more than 45% of the respondents said that their feelings about climate change actually negatively impacted their daily functioning. So it wasn't just in their heads thinking around it or worrying about it. It was also what they were doing, how they were relating, how they were performing in their work. And this climate anxiety into stress was correlated with a perceived inadequate response from governments and feelings of betrayal. And here's a graph of endorsements these youth statements that these youth endorsed. Like more than 75% said that people have failed me and the future is frightening. More than 50% reported things such as humanity is doomed and my security is threatened. And more than a third claimed that they were hesitant to have children. So this is like the mental state that a lot of youth are finding themselves in. So I just want to do a little pulse here and now. And if you're willing to join me, you can go to slido.com and you enter this number here, 3128946. And you can see if you feel any of these feelings at this moment. You don't have to. You can also just note them in your mind. I just listed a few there that people, where people sometimes end up when they have, when I'm at this point in my presentation or workshop. And it's really just to do a little pulse, a little check-in pulse with yourself after hearing the data I presented. All right, so let's see where you all are. So, not sure how many have responded at this point, but I see that many of you are reporting the heaviness, feeling so worried, tiredness. Some of you are feeling, many of you are feeling sad, some interests as well, even hopeful and calm. Okay, but the majority of you are saying worried. Thank you for doing a little check-in and sharing that with us. All right. So I'm going to move on to just in recognizing and holding all of that in this moment, that when we get into this area, feelings are often evoked, thoughts and worries are. So this is something where we may as well start getting used to and bring into our conversation as I see it. So I'm going to continue with looking at our centers of awareness and learning, or 3 of these centers that I think are kind of the primary. And these are our body, right? What we do informs us. Our body informs us. It's if it's hot or cold, if we're hungry, or if we have things to do, and it takes us there and informs us about discoveries that we learn. Our cognitions, our thinking informs us all the time, and our emotions and our feelings in our system. And so this is a basic kind of cognitive behavioral therapy outline that we often use in psychology. And I want to bring a few helpers along with us today. I want to bring a discoverer, which is the part of us that goes out and tries things and learns from trial and error. And then we have an advisor, inside of us, who is really good at learning from observation and modeling and designing all kinds of rules and pointing out when there's risky situations and giving us our own advice, sometimes too much. All of these come with their strengths and their challenges. So that's why we need to have them work together. And then we have our noticer, who is really there to help sort of open up our awareness to our experience. What's happening in this moment, in this context, within us and between us and outside of us. So I'm going to bring these little handy figures along with me as we walk along, as we continue here today. And I really draw from the DNAV model here of the discoverer, the noticer, and the advisor. That is a model developed by people in the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science, and who are kind of really draw on a lot on ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And this is a model that's been applied to youth, but also to adults. I find it really handy with adults too. So it's these kind of skills that we will have. The discoverer, noticer, and advisor are sort of abilities and skills. And they all operate within the V, which is vitality or value, that which really matters to us, that which we care about, that which makes us come alive. And all of this is, of course, sits in the context of self, a larger sense of self, and social and environmental context. It's because we, the little me, right, of which I'm going to focus more on here, exists in this larger culture of ecosystems and a we. And if we really look into that a little further, that little me is really informed by those who are closest to us as we're growing up and in our community, our family, our friends, schools, etc., which sits in the bioregion, obviously, where the earth and weather and climate also shape us, as does the entire planet. So this is thanks to Richard. I love this image here. Just to say, this is a larger context. I'll hone in on the me here that's shaped by all these layers and multi-level systems. So let's start with cognitions and thinking, and we bring our little advisor along. So individuals and households, they are responsible for about 40 to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions, depending on estimates. But it's a pretty large chunk. And in Sweden, most Swedes belong to the top 25% of the world's population with the highest carbon dioxide emissions. And if we look at the larger context of the world, we see that the highest proportions of or levels of consumption emissions come from the richest 10%, and actually really the top 1% of our income earners. And so top 10% is about making more than $38,000 a year. And the top 1%, $109,000. So we are, I think many of us do belong to this sector because it comes from the Western, Northern Hemisphere. So we emit a lot. Our carbon footprint and consumption is high, far too high for where we need to go to reach the Paris Agreement. That is no more heating than 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. We need to model more of people in the bottom 50% of income earners who emit, don't emit more than they ought to for this planet to survive. And when you look at this research further, it indicates that most Swedes actually believe that there is a climate crisis and we do need to transition. But most of us are so comfortable in our lifestyles that we don't change behavior. So this begs the question, how come? What makes this sort of knowledge or motivation gap hard to bridge? I know something, and I kind of say I need to make a transition here. But to actually do it and then change my lifestyle and my behavior, really hard. Come. What kind of thinking or reasoning do we justify do we use to justify our behaviors? So that's a good question for the advisor. And there are some scientists here in Sweden whose work really intrigued me. They study rhetoric, and they did a huge study of about 400 people, where they asked people these questions, and then they kind of summarized their answers into these topos or themes. So it's qualitative research. And here are some themes that came out: how people reason to motivate their harmful climate actions and choices. We do a budget and account thinking. So for instance, if I eat mostly vegetarian, it's okay for me to drive a regular car. Or, I use solar panels, so therefore I can fly to Thailand for my winter break. So it's as if we do some good behavior, it's pro-environmental behaviors, and therefore then I can extract and use as if I have some sort of pool of money that I can draw from, and in other situations where I don't want to change. We use a lot of comparisons. We almost always find people who are worse than us, quite not so hard. Even countries that are worse than us, of course. And then we come to this: why should I? Oh, tiny me. It's just too much for me, and I won't make a difference. This problem is so enormous. It is. And we say the system should change, or the politicians should bring this up. The government, institutions should change. Indeed, it should. The only problem is that the politicians blame the people, and they say, no, they won't vote for me if I try to increase taxes or raise the price on gas. So around we go, displacing responsibility. We have goals and values conflicts. So easy to have here. We say, oh, my partner lives across the country. And there's no way of getting there. I just have to fly. I live in the United States, for instance. Social relations are often used. Something that sort of trumps. It's more important. I need to go and visit my old sick mother. So we justify with other values, or just pragmatics, just the limits of reality. We have entangled existences. To be able to pick up my kid after work and to get some food, to get home on time, I need to use a car. I can't use public transportation. It's not reliable, etc. It is hard to change and to have this work in a system that doesn't support it. And it's just that human condition. Have some pity, or have some compassion, or forgive me. I am only human. So I wonder, do you feel any cognitive dissonance and any conflict here? Do these resonate with you in your personal lifestyle, as I've shared some examples with you? They certainly resonate with me. I am by far not living according to the climate values I would like to, but I'm endeavoring, and I think many of us are. Per Espen Stoknes is a Norwegian economist and a psychologist and also politician, and he summed up some of these defenses and barriers in his book, What We Think About When We Try Not to Think About Global Warming, as distance. It's too far in the future, it's apocalyptic, it's catastrophizing, doom, denial, different ranges of that, levels of that. Holding on to one's identity, how I have lived my life, that matters more, and it's really important to be consistent with our sort of self-image and identity. And also this sort of dissonance, this struggle between what we know we maybe should do and what we are not doing. And that's sort of what we bridge with this reasonings and these justifications. We also draw on a whole slew of cognitive biases. It's very handy. We have many of them, and they make our life more automatic and kind of efficient often. From availability heuristics, like the senator here who went out and picked up some snow outside Congress and said, there's no global warming. It's still cold out there. We still have snow. We have selective exposure. We choose our news channels that we kind of like and that confirm our biases. We hold on to our beliefs. There are many others of these that serve us and kind of protect us in this way. But I want to go and think about what we can do. Just a little brief idea of how we can shift this, drawing on the gifts of the advisor as well, which is a perspective-taking kind of exercise based on the relational frame theory, which is a theory of language and cognition that acceptance and commitment therapy sits on and rests on. And here are the deictic contexts of person, place, and time. And so if you connect these with some evolutionary processes, one way to begin to work with this a little more actively using our cognitive skills is to consider the person here, not just the me, not just the you, and not just the we, but a me-we. The me-we, as Dan Siegel says. The me and the we. How about if we center on that? And the place, selecting the planet as our target of selection, and specifically the local ground where our feet meet the earth. How is this local earth and context informing me of what it needs and how it thrives? Connecting with the time from our far back, our ancestors who many of whom lived in a way that was more conducive to a supportive relationship and with our planet and our earth. And so drawing and learning from those practices as we invest in practices that are more supportive and it would also help our future generations. So I often consider these like three centers of how do I, the person and the place, how is that, like how do I take that in, and then the time perspective. And the advisor can do all kinds of helpful little tricks with us here to help expand our perspective taking. All right, let's move into some emotions and feelings. I use this interchangeably here. And we'll draw on our noticer. The notice that shines a light on what's happening in us in this moment, our here and now, present moment awareness. Emotions come from the word immovere, which means to move or to agitate and to stir. It's something that stirs inside of us, right? And that wants to sort of be expressed or felt. And it has all kinds of functions. For one, it's one to grab our attention and direct our perception to what's salient up there, to protect us, to direct us. It has like a certain control precedence, say, or that emotions really grab us and they come up kind of involuntarily. They're just unbidden occurrences. They just show up and they're often called forth based on cues in the environment. Emotions help shape our meaning and what matters to us, what feels relevant, what feels vital. Right? That's a real deep key source of their communication within us. And we have, they kind of glue some of our mental representations, and they even kind of direct our thinking. It's sometimes, some people say it's the rudder that steers our thinking, but they orient and kind of influence our beliefs and our expectations. That's part of our meaning making. They help motivate us. They mobilize action. That's where that immovere is connected to. Okay? And they help communicate with others about what's going on inside of us and set up the response from others. So emotions are expressed a lot through our gestures and our facial expressions, and we know that the people who are in contact with us, they pick up on these cues even pre-consciously, even before we have sort of expressed how we're feeling. Happens very fast, and this kind of sets up a relational dance, and also supported by mirroring your nervous systems. So emotions are really a powerful free source of information about this moment and our inner and outer context. And so we can group emotions broadly, some of these core emotions, into kind of approach emotions or avoidance emotions. So some emotions make us want to go toward a target or open up to more of an experience, like joy, opening or engagement. Curiosity is like seeking, learning, toward moves. And anger is actually a toward move as well. Often some form of assertion, activism, boundary setting, or say, this needs to be changed, corrected. I'm going to take a stance. I'm going to walk toward it. Whether I do that with my words or even my body, it's an approach emotion. And then we have these aversive emotions that are harder for us to feel often, like guilt and shame, which usually want to make us withdraw or hide. Fear, which brings often a fleeing, or let me get over here, it's dangerous, let me protect myself, or a freezing. And sadness, which also tends to bring more of a withdrawal. Sometimes you might signal through sadness a need for connection and comfort. So considering these emotions, and then many of them are evoked in the context of climate, we can also understand why some people react by, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to deal with it, it's too complex and too difficult, it makes me too sad, there's too much losses here, it's too scary, it's too overwhelming. Some go out in activism and protest and engage, maybe fueled by their anger. So it's all emotions here. Are appropriate. There's this need to feel sadness and to feel fear and to feel anger in the context of climate makes a ton of sense. And these are not emotions that need to be corrected or changed for that matter. It's more that we need to find a way and learn how to use them and draw on them and understand them. And one way is to consider these like a climate emotion wheel that Panu Pikala, he's an climate theologian in Finland. He designed this based on a lot of the emotions that he's researched in the climate context. And he's just picked a few that are often named, like the anger area, frustration or outrage, fear, powerlessness, anxiety there, and the sadness, losing areas that we know and recognize from our past. I was just in the Alps, and it's a changing alpine world today, and that brought out quite a bit of sadness for me. And also even positivity. There are some people who find that they get they find some hope or inspiration and empathy even empathy in this area, and I'll get more into that later. But this is an exercise we can do, and you did that a little bit earlier at the end of my first section. And this is where we apply that noticer, like what's happening inside of me as I think and talk and relate to others, or just take in information. And we can draw our own sort of climate emotion wheel of emotions that we feel the most often or most strongly in this context. You might just take a moment and think for yourself, what comes up for me? Maybe it's hard to feel emotions here, even, and that can be a way of kind of, right, we might need to do a little bit more opening or exploring there. And we might also ask ourselves, what do these emotions tell you about you and what matters to you? So emotions are a way that we kind of connect to ourselves and our motivations and also what matters to us and shape our meaning. Here, we have emotions often in the context of others, other people, and we get into various relational dances, some of which are harder to manage than others. I love the sculpture from Burning Man. And in thinking about this relational dance that we do in the context with others, we can be in a place of attunement, where we feel we kind of coordinated, we're synchronized, and we understand each other. We don't step on each other's toes. There's a nice flow between me and my partner, my children, my friends. But inevitably, in any relationship, in any healthy relationship, we confront misattunement. We face misattunement, where we happen to miss a cue, for instance, or we step on someone, we hurt someone. And then, do we go to that next step of repair? That's where a lot of us we miss that part, repairing to reconnect and our relational bond. And if we dig into this a little further, the steps of this relational dance, and this is research coming both from the infant, adult and infant field, research field, attachment field, as well as between adults. There are 5 basic steps in this relational dance. We reach, we invite connection. It's like a little bid for connection. It can be a question, it can just be how was your day today? Or, hey, there's something I was thinking of earlier today. A little bit, a little just look. It could be a gesture. If that bid is met by the other, we feel attuned. If it's not met, we might go further in that little bit. We might start pushing a little bit or asking a little further. We might approach, we might push for more. We might start complaining a little bit. We might even get so upset if this happens repeatedly that it becomes a big protest. See that a lot in children. We might turn away or shut down, protecting ourselves from rejection. Because I've tried, I've learned it doesn't help, I give up, I pull away. If this happens repeatedly, we might even have a meltdown. And we really then need to work on some reconnection. This dance happens from cradle to grave. It's a part of our relational, of the music in any relationship. And I often think of how we do that dance in relation to our planet and nature, of which we are, of course, a part. And whether the Earth at this point might be in a meltdown stage, having reached for us, not been met, having, is exploding in storms and in strong winds and in fires, and maybe giving up, drying up, shutting down. And how do we repair and find our way back to reconnection with the Earth and our planet and our whole ecosystem? I think that is really the question, right? Many people consider this climate crisis a crisis of relationships. So it's relationship to self, relationship to others, relationship to the environment, relationship to our past and our future generations. I'll speak a little bit more about this, but I want to bring in the body in action first. And here, let's bring the discoverer along. The part of us that goes out and tries and tests things and learns from that. But the challenge is not so simply, what can I do? What action should I take? That's certainly how it was for me when I got into this field. It's so enormous, and what can little I contribute? So we might, like Peanut, just drop out or scream in desperation, enough. I don't know. And we might, because it's easy to get outside of our window of tolerance, where we operate maybe with more flexibility and regulation and adaptability, and we kind of feel like we have a grasp of things and understand how we can, and we might easily get overwhelmed, feel the frustration, the powerlessness, and get into a fight or flight mode of hyperarousal, or we shut down, pull away, and we move into this more freeze hypoarousal, where it's maybe even hard for ourselves to reach and connect with our inside. So staying in this window, or mostly within this window of tolerance, given the complexity of our situation, can be a challenge. And one way of on strengthening us is to consider our basic psychological needs. And because when they are met, we operate at our best, really, with psychological well-being and healthily, and also more persistently. And these are basic psychological needs. Here are about more than 20 years of research from self-determination theory. And they are really three kind of broad areas of autonomy, meaning I get to choose and write the script of my life. I have the freedom of choice of what I orient toward or do with my energy, my actions. I have a sense of competence that what I do moves me toward my goals, and I have an effect. I might even develop some mastery, and that feels good to contribute that skill. And a relatedness, meaning I'm part of something larger than myself, part of a belonging, a group, I'm included, and we are moving together. When we have these areas, when these are basic psychological needs, we tap into our intrinsic motivation, which is the most long-lasting. It's like a well source that we can draw on that's deeper than other forms of motivation, certainly than coercion, and also extrinsic motivation, where we try to kind of manipulate with rewards or punishment. So as we go out in this field, connecting to our intrinsic motivation and understanding that about ourselves, it really helps. This is shown also in some research that when we have our basic psychological needs met, we feel satisfied and we are more able to cope with threatening information. And there's no shortage of that in this field. And we actually engage in more pro-environmental behaviors. We perform them more frequently, research shows. We have intent of maintaining them longer. We engage in more pro-social behaviors like better food choices, and also in transportation choices that are more climate friendly. And they persist. These behaviors persist, and that's exactly what the research tends to show about when we're intrinsically motivated. When faced with adversity, we don't just give up. There's actually taps into a resilience and a persistence. We also have a greater sense of kind of sufficiency. We are more content and in a state with ourselves and with our situation as compared to kind of a scarcity mentality. And if we don't have these parts met of us, we go more into self-protective, often avoidance strategies. So I want to say this: when we can go out and if you want to move in this direction and figure out what to do, connect with your intrinsic needs, and then think about what you can do as a consumer. What kind of choices I make when the products I buy. Do I have some information and learning there? Am I a citizen as I'm voting? Another role where I hope we take seriously, especially this year. And as a participant in an organization, at work, in my neighborhood, in my community, can I bring some light to products we use, or how we the sourcing or delivery and manufacturing kind of chains? How climate friendly are they? Can we improve in those? just as a role model, speaking about this with others. That's a great way of keeping the conversation going. And as an investor, how does my bank invest my money? What type of industries does it invest in, by retirement funds and so forth? So we have some areas as an individual we can look into, and especially us in the higher socioeconomic classes of the world. This is really where we can begin to cut down on some of our greenhouse gas emissions by exploring these roles. And I really like Ayana Johnson. She's a marine biologist, and this is her TED Talk about and where she talks about how to find joy in climate action. And she brings out this Venn diagram that we each can explore, like what brings us joy, what am I good at, and what works need doing. And in there, we might find our little sweet spot, and that is your climate action. So that's where I ask you to bring your little discoverer and shine the light on yourself and go out and to explore. Okay, I am now at the last part, and I just want to check in a little bit and see how we all are doing, and whether I should go into that. It's maybe another 10 minutes, or whether we want to stop here and do a little discussion, any questions that might have come up. Let me know where you're at.
I would definitely like to hear your talk, and we have a half an hour afterwards, so that's why we have 90-minute sessions here. So I would encourage you, Viveka, to complete the talk. I'm looking forward to this section, and what you've done so far is wonderful.
Wonderful, great. I'll keep going then. Okay. So the Great Turning is about this shifting from the Great Unraveling into the Great Turning. It's also a John and Macy term. And I just want to sort of lay the foundation that this is about linking both inner and outer transformation. So it's not one or the other. They go hand in hand and support each other as we kind of bring awareness to our inside life, and also how we embody that, and how we can bring that out in the world at large, and see if we can have an impact on our systems and cultures and groups. This is where transformation happens, inside and outside. And so it's both sort of top-down methods and bottom-up approaches that we want to try to combine. And especially then we can, and in the areas of structural changes in government policies, in economic incentives, all of that huge big area, of course, in the social context, media, news, in social movements that are happening, and in changing social norms, as well as in this sort of more personal, immediate, my own choices, awareness of my intentions and behaviors and habits and routines, and sharing of information. So there are many areas here that the Great Turning consists of, and that we need to activate. But I'm going to hone in on the individual primarily, and considering that in some respect we are like every other human, like some other humans, like no other human. So we have beautiful variation in our individualities, and this is something to really celebrate and draw on, that diversity. And as we step into this kind of field and begin to read and learn more, and many of us are already there, and you might have had your own process in there, but we might be kind of more of that unknowing and not so informed or not so engaged, and then we kind of get into it and develop some semi-consciousness and move actually into some form of awakening. I see that happening for people, and that can be gradual, or it can be kind of in a shock form of awakening. And when we get there, if we're there, we might be faced with these emotions that I've spoken about, and they can be really overwhelming and hard to hold. So What do we do there? And I'm saying here that emotions are sources of information. They're like data with a soul, as Brené Brown says, that can mobilize climate action. And this was well put by some scientists in the Lancet Planetary Health that wrote, recognizing that emotions are often what leads people to act, it is possible that feelings of ecological anxiety and grief, although uncomfortable, are in fact the crucible through which humanity must pass to harness the energy and conviction that are needed for the life-saving changes now required. So how can we draw on these emotions? How can we mobilize them? How can we move from experiential avoidance into experiential contact with ourselves and each other and the planet at large and our ecosystem at large, to get kind of closer and more attuned to what's happening, and while holding and relating to all these emotions and thoughts and worries that come up. Well, I do find that the ACT Hexaflex, acceptance and commitment therapy, where there are 6 psychological processes, is a really comprehensive and useful tool in this regard. And these processes are intended to help us develop psychological flexibility, clearly needed in this context. And just a broad, brief, quick little overview. We have a pillar of openness, where we connect with our inside and our feelings, and we learn to hold them. We also learn to see and recognize thoughts as thoughts and thinking, and not necessarily truths. So we can unhook. That's often needed, some unhooking from our fusion with our thinking. Connecting into the present moment, right? The noticer, for instance, and the larger context that we're in. Bringing awareness to that as we engaged with actions in a valued direction. We have like an EvoFlex version of this, where I've labeled these kind of processes also from kind of a needs perspective, psychological needs. You'll see some of that in other basic values, needs that we have, most of us, that we have as humans. And here we can map it onto these evolutionary kind of principles of variation, right? As individuals and as people in group, we have lots of variation of our inner worlds. We want to try to apply those to a particular context, drawing on where our minds are, attention is, and myself and my perspective taking abilities. And as I select a behavior in direction of something that I value, something I've freely chosen, and that behavior we try to replicate so we retain it for ourselves and for future generations, these adaptive behaviors. And what are some of those values we want to go toward? I shared some of that social, dominant social paradigm initially. Here is an alternative of ecological principles that we can consider, that all life is interdependent, that diversity equals resilience. It really enhances resilience. That there are limits to economic growth, and that life systems are circular, and that even small actions can have big consequences. Even these little butterfly wings can have ripple effects. So this is a different type of worldview, and that we can kind of turn toward and try to dig into as we inform ourselves and as we are connecting with those values in this direction. And ProSocial world is really one that I think is putting this on the map, and whose mission statement is to consciously evolve a world that works for all. I think modeled on these eusocial insects like termites and bees and ants that are sort of a super organism, and where each ant or each being are in a single cell context or a single organism context, where each cell really works toward the benefit of the whole. So I think this is really where David is doing, and many other people in this in this organization, we're trying to connect people and groups toward shared purpose and collective action. Currently in the ProSocial Action Lab, it's where it's really done, where we work with groups from all sectors, bringing self-awareness and responsiveness, like teaching listening skills, for instance, identifying our shared purpose and vision as a group, and what actions to take to move toward that. And we use tools that you might be familiar with, such as the ACT matrix, where the top half is really what goes on our inside, our feelings and thoughts and sensations. And the bottom half is about the actions we take. And so this is also the kind of integration of that inner and outer as we move toward our values, the right-hand side here, or away from those feelings and thoughts and stuff that we don't want to have. So it's a handy noticing tool. And in the context of climate, there's the models that are out there have some overlap, and how to cope with our emotions and how to kind of grow and change with them. And Panu Pikala has one model where he has his 3 sectors, and they're the climate psychologists in Sweden is a group, and they have a similar model. And both emphasize action, the need to act. It helps us usually, especially when we do take collective action and we're part of a larger, of more than me. We support each other in that. We can help reduce some of that overwhelm. And we need to also understand and connect with our emotions, not try to suppress or not have them. They are there. And so how do we engage with them and learn to relate to them, and also learn some healthy coping skills. And at times we need to maybe just distance or pause, take a break from action and the feeling and all the complexity here. Self-care and other activities that disconnect us so we don't burn out. And Joanna Macy, whose shoulders many of us rest on, she was like an eco-philosopher, systems thinker, and a Buddhist scholar. And her model, and that was been written about together with Chris Johnston in Active Hope, and is a work now that's called the work that we connects. Also, it starts from connecting with our gratitude. Being alive, being a human on this planet, what matters to us in being here. And as we honor the pain of the world, when we learn to see with new eyes and opening our eyes as we go forth. So here we have the little me, right, in this larger context of the culture and ecosystem and the we. And there is that moat around that me, the white space. And I often think of that as the relational space, where that bridges the me to the larger context, where we primarily use and draw language and communication in our world today, and where we are both influenced by that larger context and where we influence and impact it. And in the context of climate, there is an organization that has, I just wanted to put their website out here because they have free resources where that helps us talk about climate, because we often get into all kinds of kind of nooks and crannies that get us caught debating and not listening or hearing. And there's free resources, a really useful package. So you can just Google this, climateoutreach.org. I just recently came across this and was excited to find it. But for here and now, all I want to say is I want to elaborate on a few relating that I had some fun designing. And starting with, and as we move into this, refraining from autopilot reactions to give room for reflection, perspective taking, and learning, to connect with our resilience, to hear our distress signals, motivating us to build our resources like psychological flexibility, and our relationships in the community to consciously and adaptively respond based on what situation and values call for, and engage in repair to bring about post-rupture or post-traumatic growth to regenerate. And as we go forth, we are likely to connect to not only these difficult climate-related emotions and processes, but also the other side of that coin, where we can sense some possibility of human relational growth and the service of regenerating the planet and people. And this might look like, as I have experienced as I've gone into this field, experiences of belonging and hope, acceptance and awakening, show appreciation and gratitude, a sense of resilience and connection and community, really stunning creativity, agency, flexibility, and even transformation. Because we hurt where we care, and we care where we hurt. So let's see how we can take that pain and turn it into purpose. Steve Hayes says, co-founder of ACT. So I think these are the real possibilities, even as we enter a field that is as difficult and challenging and complex as the climate field is, psychologically and beyond. So thank you for your attention. Been listening for quite a while. I'm gonna stop the sharing here.
Awesome. So wonderful. And really was great. And so now we have time for questions. And let me just quickly announce the next week's talk. We now have seminars every week and alternating between noon and 6 p.m. Eastern time to accommodate different time zones. And the next seminar next week is on the arts from an evolutionary perspective, a wonderful focus. Joe Carroll, who's a pioneer of the study of literature from an evolutionary perspective, will be talking about truth about fiction, biological reality, and imaginary lives. And so I welcome you to all of that. Also encourage all of you to join the ProSocial Commons, our community, if you haven't already. And now let's have some questions for Viveka. And I will not be the first. So please raise your virtual hands. Who wants to go first? Kelly, I believe that you're first. Thank you.
Yeah. Viveka, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I learned so much from that. You talked a lot about emotions, and I feel like when I think about the environment or engage with a talk on that, in order to like cope with it or take action, I'll kind of numb from my reaction and kind of like abandon the reaction, and then I can take action. I'm like disconnected from the emotion, but then I'm like numb. And so do you have advice for like the amount that you kind of stay connected to a little bit of grief so you're alive and vital and flowing while you take action? I don't know. I feel like with harder things, like I just disconnect from it and then I like kind of force myself to take action. Is that making sense? Hey, you're on mute.
Thank you.
I heard. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, great topic, Kelly. And I think this is really where that sort of that window of tolerance and some of those kind of hypo-arousal kicks in, where it seems too much, we turn it away, we tune out. And I think it's adaptive as well in many contexts. And here, if we do that repeatedly, I guess we continue to disconnect. That's the risk. We also don't get the chance to connect with others as much. Emotions are kind of our connectors, and so that's and so what I think you said you will force yourself. So that could be an initial step. I would hope you can find maybe people or groups or contexts where some of that can be like you did here. It can be said and expressed, and then as we in this kind of water together, and we hear and listen and support each other. I think it tends to make it safer and a little bit more, ease it a bit, so that we can talk and it can stay connected more, and we can draw on each other's kind of differences here and strengths and kind of coping skills. So I think that putting yourself in context where people are welcoming and willing to engage in these conversations is a way of staying a little more in touch with it.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mark.
So it seems to me that the really critical issue here is denial of all the changes and the difficulties. And you talked about avoidance and so, and I see this with myself as well. So as a psychologist, you know about denial, right? So what are practical suggestions, either for us individuals, but actually also talking with other people? Because I feel whenever I start talking about it, it's, the denial sets in and things become really tight. And so yeah, please inform me.
I mean, it's curious because the data I showed you here, 93% of Swedes, maybe that the Swedes, they don't deny like that we're in a climate crisis, and that we need to transition and change. So that the change is very hard. I think that seems to be a little bit more what at least the data suggests. There are different ranges of that, and dissonance is one form of denial as well. So I would I think that we can unpack that term, and many psychoanalysts have and so forth. But when it comes up, if it's just a quick like shutdown response from the other, or that they shut you down, or they're not interested. I mean, if this is the context of, if it's a psychotherapy session, that might not be the context for you, like pushing on that, right? But if in another context where you're in the group of people who are here to discuss and explore that, or maybe just in a family situation or something, I would move away from convincing and trying to get into some sort of debate of who's right or wrong. I think that's often what happens. And to connect a little bit more with what comes up for you, and bring your curiosity out. And is this something not interesting to you, or is this what do you do when you go to the supermarket and try to select food, and and that steak looks so good? I don't know. You can bring up some prompts or some cue, like from a place of exploration and curiosity. But if it's just a flat out denial that this is not happening, I think we have very limited resources. We can present all the data in the world, we can get into debates and social media and so forth. I don't think those are very productive places, and yet we need to continue to talk about it, of course. But I also, if it's just a huge block, my default would be more to kind of shift a little bit, see how I can connect with a person in other ways, and more gradually build a relationship, so that we can then maybe enter and have a little more productive exploration after a while.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, I feel like emphasizing something that you are, excuse me, Thomas, did you want to go next? You'll need to unmute.
Oh, I can't hear you, Thomas. I think you're still
muted.
There you go.
How about now?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for great presentation. I am very skeptical, or even cynical, about our generation, but I am extremely enthusiastic about young generation, especially very young, as I am pediatrician. So parenting and education. This is an area where the motivation is already there. You don't need to worry about how we are doing with changing this. For kids, people are doing a lot. And especially the younger is a kid, the more is inbuilt evolutionary motivation there, doing what is good for a kid. So if we convince somebody that what we're doing is together with the modification of a parenting and an education, can you transform your advice for those old folks, cynical folks, towards young parents? Do you have a parenting version of your presentation?
A parenting version of the presentation, or how to talk with kids about this as parents. I think that's a question.
No, about parents.
Yeah.
Oh, how to talk to parents.
Yeah.
Well, the way
Or teachers.
Yeah, there's more and more material out there and about how to bring that. Actually, I see in my own kids as at least that their schools do bring quite a bit of attention to this topic, and so in various classes and from various perspectives. So I think it's it seems here at least out there, and kids know about it, but I think it's harder to get it sort of, to integrate on a more personal level, actually. And I think that's maybe where parents can come in and try to infiltrate a little bit more. There are these climate psychologists in Sweden. They go out in schools a lot and they teach teachers how to bring this up. And my approach here is, in general, is to see how we can create sort of more of a safety or an open forum for people to voice their fears and concerns, and to bring it into not like, here's what you should do, but more like, can we create an openness and a safety for having these conversations? Because I think from there, people will have more connect to their inner interests and their sense of autonomy and what they choose to engage in. Like in the class we taught, it had an experiential component to it, where we practiced all kinds of meditations, going out in nature, communication explorations, along with the didactics. And then at the end, the students did a climate action plan. But this is really of their own choosing, like what they felt motivated to invest in. Because you can find almost in any area, you can find a connection to climate and something that you can contribute. So, but that's where I would encourage in schools as well, that people, you can provide the information based on the topics, and then also see if you can get the children engaged in some form of project or action plan that they find motivating. And it's also, yes, to develop, like as parents, it's so much our culture, and I find so many if the culture is to fly away on the weekends and go and rather meet, like that's what the kids have, and it's very hard in their teenage lesson years to sort of turn that around. But you can do your little modeling as a parent, and then gradually you hope that will get into the sort of bloodstream and the water of the children as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Viveka, I feel like emphasizing something that you have also emphasized, but perhaps not enough in my view, and it is the importance of functioning in the context of small, purpose-oriented groups, and as opposed to an individual at the individual level. And of course, you have emphasized this, but there were large sections of your talk in which it seemed to me that you were operating in, I might think, standard therapist mode, where you, the therapist, are interacting, after all, with a single individual. That's your point of contact. And then you might encourage that individual to form groups and so on and so forth. But the alternative to that is to actually make that functioning in groups part like the very first thing before we get started, form into a group and then have the therapeutic relationship be with the group and the individuals as members of groups. And I feel like, for example, with the emotional part of it, when I looked at that emotion wheel and the positive sector of the emotion wheel where we all want to be, that working directly with an individual to get to that space, as opposed to working with a group, that the group is so much more of a self-regulatory unit that it's so much easier for an individual to occupy that space. I mean, actually, frankly, all of the spaces as a member of a purpose-oriented group than as an individual. So, you know, I, I doubt that you disagree with it, but I just,
Yeah.
and I have an article with Jim Cohen
Mm,
on this topic called Groups as Organisms, Implications for Training and Therapy that I put it in the chat, and I just like to recommend it on this theme of, and I think it's really the primary contribution of ProSocial to ACT is to add this social and multi-level dimension to what has been developed primarily at the level of individuals or at most couples and families. So that's more of a statement than a comment, but I'd love to have your opinion on it.
mm-hmm. I agree. I agree, and I think this is where the positive sides, the sense of community and belonging and connection, they really they grow from those contexts of the groups. So I think this is a really appropriate suggestion, and I agree with it. It's still like, do you force people into groups, right? Or do you try to help people connect with the groups that they're already in? And that's where I think we are the participants in our organizations, and we can bring this in there, the back way a little bit of shining some light on, more climate smart ways of acting and doing business, for instance. And there's some people who just feel very avoidant to be part of those of groups and step into that collective. So it's a little bit more like finding ways of creating those contexts. And I think you're doing a marvelous job in ProSocial. That's what we try to do in our climate class as well, right? To form those connections and go on. And this is actually a lot with children. Right? This is one way of doing this, by being engaged in groups that are out in nature and build the relationships more directly with nature. So I don't disagree, and I think it's sort of more of an action learning. You go out, it's the discoverer that takes you out, and you do something and you learn, you feel from that. You feel the benefits of being part of those communities.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to one of our partners, David Gershon and the Empowerment Institute, who is, I like to call him a practitioner genius at forming groups around issues like this. And he has a whole program called the Cool Blocks program, how to put your neighborhood on a low carbon diet, as he likes to put it. And his most recent venture is called the Peace on Earth Zones, which could have multiple foci. And so I think we'll provide information on that. But he has a real recipe for forming groups in your neighborhood. Do this, then do that. Something that's really easy to follow, and at the same time has quite a bit of flexibility as to exactly what you do, and even builds in replication. Part of what you do in this program is you create more groups. And so it's genius, really. And we're thrilled to work with him and his wife, Gail Strom. They use it for women's empowerment all over the world as well. So that's a shout out to one of our organizational partners, and happy to share more to anyone who'd like to just contact us, including yourself.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. Yeah, they have I would love to learn about that. There are lots of groups and organizations also for youth and the force of nature, and they're so this is a little bit more coming from a place of, yes, if you're struggling with some emotions here that are feeling so overwhelming and that you don't know what to do, Like how do you connect with those and draw on those emotions to activate that there are many, right? There are many entry points. Maybe just because feeling overwhelmed and feeling the grief doesn't mean that we can't engage, even though it can seem counterintuitive to move forward and try to connect in that. I think this is part of why it's so people they avoid many of these conversations because they are often uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, we have 6 more minutes, and what I'd like to do, unless if there's no raised hands, is actually do a kind of a checkout. I don't think we can check out with everyone, but if you don't mind me being mischievous, let me just call on some names and just have them give an impromptu response. Is that okay? You can't stop me. So I'm going to start on Susan. So, hey.
Oh, thank you. Viveka, thank you so much. I really do try to hold to the joy side and also recognize the dire space that we're in. So I loved your presentation. I was taking pictures. I want to share it with others. So I know that ProSocial World does a great job of making all of this available after the fact. Thank you. I'm coming from deep gratitude for all the time and effort and energy that went into this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Clayton, how about you? Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, this is, I actually did send a private message to Viveka about what I am thinking here. This is, really something that's, aligned intellectually with my worldview. So it was nice to be, to hear this affirming message. What I was sharing with Viveka is just some of the difficulties in converting that into in real life. Action, it's kind of a militant word, but anyway, yeah, it's just a difficult space to traverse from that me to we in the real life. I think it's easier online, less effective, and so getting this into yeah, I guess I hear myself repeating myself, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, great, thank you. Lauren, how about you?
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I also took so many notes throughout it and screenshots, and definitely had a lot of thoughts. One thing I think a lot about is how we can teach kind of psychological flexibility and ecological values almost as prevention science, like broadly to youth. And so I've just been thinking about how we could actually do that. And when you were talking about the dialectic framing, teaching me and we, I was almost thinking of it as like two separate things. Me is the same as we, and also me and we. And I definitely want to explore that a little bit more on how we could actually teach that.
Great.
Great, Lauren.
Great. Vivek, are you there? We have your screen image, and I'll give you just a second, and then I'll pick on somebody else. Bernd, how about you, if you're there?
I'm still around. Thank you. I loved it. I was just typing the content. I came late, and I will so enjoy that you will put this on YouTube. Gonna love watching it again and gonna enjoy it. Really loved it. Thank you so much. Apologies for being late. That's why I emphasized the recording.
Oh, no, no problem. Heidi, how about you? Heidi, are you available?
I am. I think you just called on me. This was incredible. Absolutely wonderful, Viveka. I will share it with my class. I will share it with colleagues who I teach environmental science and planetary change. And we're aware of how concerned students are who take our classes, and where and how can we support the people who want to learn how the planet works. as they learn how the planet works and they see where we've landed. Space that, you know, I'm curious about, and I didn't and don't always see mentioned, is if I don't believe change is hard. I don't want to believe change is hard. I want to believe that change is possible, and that some of those hard changes may be stepping back into faith spaces for the many of us that have stepped out. And what does that look like, and how do we open that up? And my exploration is, well, we're each an experiment of one. So I decided to start theology school and figure out what it's like when a climate scientist shows up in theology school. And I'll give you a heads up. The brief story is they are so welcoming. And the people in theology school have all been like, we don't know why more of you aren't here. Just like what's happening as I step into the world of psychology and ProSocial. People keep saying to me, well, why are not more of you all here? Because of course you need these spaces too. So thank you for creating space for me, Viveka, and ProSocial World. As a climate scientist.
Viveka, let's give you the final word. No, I'm going to take the final word, but you get the penultimate word, and then I'm going to reinforce what Heidi just said. But first to you, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, just moved to hear your what people have brought up here, and really thank you. And I just feel like these are kind of the context we want to create to have more conversations like this. And I think, Heidi, you're putting something really on the map here. What's the role of faith? And you are quite the discoverer going out there and bridging many worlds. You know, and so, yes, let's continue to have these conversations. And I'm grateful for ProSocial World who makes them available like this.
Thank you. And I think that Heidi ended where you began, Viveka, talking about spirituality with the early quote, that this is not just a sciencey thing. This really is ultimately has to do with spirituality and faith. And I'm just really proud that ProSocial combines the sciencey part with the spiritual part. And actually on theology, I'm just starting a series of conversation with Ilia Delio. So look up Ilia Delio if you don't already know her, who's a true theologist. And we're having a wonderful series of conversations, which Heidi, I think you and others will be very interested in. It'll be forthcoming, and I'll type in Ilia Delio Center for Christogenesis. Having much to do with Teilhard de Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who really is a pivotal figure. And there's so much more to say about all of this. So, and that's why we do this every week. and that's why we're such a great organization doing this in so many different ways. So I encourage involvement. There's multiple forms of involvement. Easiest one is to join the ProSocial Commons. And one way or another, then we really want to engage and to catalyze all of this. And so thanks once again. And we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming.